Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Word of the Day podcast. My name is Jamie Silva. I am your host, and I am just thrilled to have an opportunity once again to pleasantly explain another useful word to you all. We've actually got a couple words on the docket today, so we got to get right into it. But first, please join me in welcoming to the program yet another talented voice actor and amateur etymologist. In fact, the very person who suggested today's words, Emily. Emily, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's kick things off with today's first word, dearth. This is a noun, and very simply, it means a scarcity or a shortage of something. So I might say, oh dear, I seem to have a dearth of matches, and this pile of charcoal is just refusing to light. I better go get some gasoline just to be safe. Now, as the context here makes pretty clear, I'm just saying I barely have any matches left. There is a shortage of them, and thus there is a dearth of the matches.
The online definition for dearth agrees with yours, reading, quote, a scarcity or lack of something, unquote. So basically, if you don't have something or you don't have very much of it, then you have a dearth of it. Or alternatively, there is a dearth of it. By way of example, consider the immortal words of the evil Sith Lord, Darth Vader, quote, I find your dearth of faith disturbing.
Ah, yes, of course. That's one of Darth Vader's most memorable lines. And in the same vein, there's this from Princess Leia, also of Star Wars fame, quote, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Without you, the rebellion will suffer from a serious dearth of hope.
And who could resist a plea like that?
Exactly. Now, one reason I picked this word is
because I suggested it?
I mean, sort of, but people suggest words all the time that, for one reason or another, we can't or just don't feature. Dearth, though, really had a leg up, because, you see, my main line of work involves, in part, the field of economics, and the word dearth is sort of economics jargon.
Back in the day, that is, a few centuries ago, economic thinkers would frequently refer to, say, a dearth of a certain good, and this dearth would cause the price to rise, thus incentivizing producers to supply more of it. This would remedy the dearth, and consequently bring markets back into a happy equilibrium, or maybe even a surfeit, which is just another old-timey economicsy word for a surplus.
Here, for example, is a quotation from one such famous economic thinker and writer, Adam Smith, writing in the year 1776.
And when he says, me, but are you about to read from a centuries-old treatise on economics?
This is from a book, actually, not a treatise, but basically, yeah. You got a problem with that?
I mean, no, just economics is a notoriously confusing field, and people back then wrote in long, confusing sentences already, so I just hope whatever you're about to read is going to make sense to the listeners, you know?
Okay, well, first, I resent the claim that economics is inherently confusing. And second, I think what follows will be crystal clear to listeners everywhere. As I was saying, Adam Smith wrote the following, quote, were all nations to follow the liberal system of free exportation and free importation, the different states into which a great continent was divided would so far resemble the different provinces of a great empire. As among the different provinces of a great empire, the freedom of inland trade appears, both from reason and experience, not only the best palliative of a dearth, that is a dearth, Emily, you catch that? But also the most effectual preventative of a famine, so would the freedom of exportation and importation in trade be among the different states into which a great continent was divided, unquote. Well, Emily?
Yeah, like you said, Jamie, crystal clear.
Oh, thank you. You can still summarize for the audience if you want, though.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. Folks, what Mr. Smith is trying to say here is that free trade is pretty great because it alleviates dearths of things, i.e., it allows you to get stuff you don't have.
Okay, let's delve into the etymology. Dearth comes from an Old English word meaning precious or costly, which is also where the old-fashioned sense of the word dear comes from. And that's dear as in, dear so-and-so, happy birthday, signed me.
This word, dear, also meant valuable or expensive. So you could say, gosh, I don't know if I want to buy this umbrella. $39.99? That's very dear.
Or, guess what happens when there's a dearth of something? Same thing that happens anytime supply is low and demand is high. It becomes dear, i.e. more expensive.
So what this means is, when you start a letter with the phrase, Dear Margie, what you're basically saying to Margie is that she is very valuable, very precious to you.
And precious, actually, can also more or less mean pricey or costly. Here, think of precious stones, like rubies or diamonds or emeralds or whatever, which of course are very expensive. So calling Margie dear is a nice sentiment, and in a sense, very accurate. Like, presumably, there's only one of Margie, and hence there is, in effect, a dearth of her. And by extension, she is dear.
Not that you would want to actually spell this out or draw on the etymology in whatever you're writing, because that might come across as a little weird.
Yeah, no, that's really true. I mean, you don't want to be like, dearest Margie, you are very dear to me, which is to say, very difficult to replace, because there seems to be a dearth of substitutable Margies around. And most likely, the search costs associated with locating a new Margie would be prohibitively high. Hence, like I said, at this point in time, given prevailing market conditions, you, Margie, are quite valuable to me. Please don't leave, because you exercise a natural monopoly over my heart. Sincerely and economically yours, etc. Now, Emily, what do you say? You think the author is playing his cards right with Margie here?
Let's just say analysts are forecasting a 100% drop in letters from Margie in the spring quarter.
Ouch. Well, all right. Let's now get a couple examples of how to use dearth in everyday conversation or writing. Emily, lead us off.
Sure. Example number 1. While all of Daniel's siblings would laugh uproariously through every buddy cop comedy they could get their hands on, Daniel only found them mildly and infrequently funny. They were all the same, he thought, and they all suffered from a definite dearth of mirth.
A dearth of mirth, you say?
That's right, Jamie. The ball's in your court.
Challenge accepted. Example number 2. At first, Kevin's friends were supportive of his new diet, which consisted entirely of cucumber skins, pickled beet greens, and birdseed. But after a couple weeks, they started to get a little concerned that he might be overdoing it. Kevin was getting thin and pale and frail. In short, he was exhibiting a worrisome dearth of girth.
Hey, not bad. Say, Jamie, this reminds me. I think there are way too few movies nowadays featuring the fantastic British actor Colin Firth. I just feel like we never see him anymore.
Are you saying
that there's a dearth of Firth? Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, that's enough of that. How about a little palate cleanser? Just something totally different. Like, Emily, did you do anything fun last weekend?
Oh, yes, I did. Thanks for asking. I went boating with my family, actually, which was really great. Except, well, you see, we were out on this lake, which usually isn't crowded at all, which means there's plenty of space for everybody. Plus, there are boats, kayaks, jet skis, canoes, parasails, yachts, carnival cruises, what have you. But this weekend, for whatever reason, it was so crowded out on the water that all the boats were passing really close to each other. One might say there was a dangerous dearth of berth.
Oh, that's berth as in the nautical term, referring to the space a ship has to maneuver on the water?
Yup.
Oh, my. I hope you're proud of yourself.
Yes, I am.
With that, let's turn to our second word today, the noun dregs. This is related to dearth, and it means the very last bit of something. Frequently, the last bit of a liquid of some sort, but not always.
The online definition of dregs, meanwhile, goes like this, quote, the remnants of a liquid left in a container, together with any sediment or grounds, unquote. So, pretty close to your definition, though this emphasizes that the drink should probably have some sort of inedible residue at the bottom of the glass or jar or whatever, like coffee grounds or cocoa sludge.
Right, or maybe those, those tiny little flakes or grains at the bottom of a wine glass when you're done drinking it. What do you call those?
Dregs.
Yes, I know, they're the dregs of the wine, but what are they called? Like, what's the technical, wine connoisseur name for them?
Dregs, Jamie. Those are literally called, by wine lovers, sommeliers, and vintners alike, the dregs. They're edible, though. They won't hurt you. They just taste a little funny.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. As does the fact that if you down a drink, you just gulp it all down. You're said to be drinking it down to the dregs, which is still a pretty common phrase these days. Though I think it's a little ambiguous. Like, is it saying you drank it until there was just a little bit left, i.e. the dregs? Or did you drink all of it, such that even the dregs are gone? I'm not sure, but you probably get the idea anyway.
By the way, this doesn't mean that it's impossible to drink to the dregs beverages that don't leave some deposit or residue at the bottom. Like, you can absolutely refer to drinking a soda or a glass of water to the dregs, and that still works.
Now, there is one more definition of dregs that we'll just mention in passing because I don't think it's as common. It goes, quote, the most worthless part or parts of something, unquote. So sort of a bottom-of-the-barrel concept here. This is the worst, the least valuable part of something.
You can see how this alternate definition of dregs draws on the leftover sediment in a drink angle. Like, no one likes that part. They don't drink it. They just throw it away. The dregs are worthless.
Yeah, like the example Google gives goes, quote, the dregs of society, which is a great example because it's the most common way you see this sense of dregs used.
Well, that's harsh.
Quite.
Also, not all dregs are worthless. Like, Jamie, would you like to hear a fun fact about South Dakota?
Who wouldn't?
Their top export is distillery dregs. Last year, South Dakota exported $91 million worth of this stuff.
Okay, so first, good for South Dakota. And second, what are distillery dregs?
Good question. Here's a definition. Quote, spent grain, a byproduct of brewing or distilling processes, primarily sold for use in making animal feeds.
So basically, whatever solids are left over after you brew beer.
Right.
Fascinating. Well, I think it's about time for some examples, don't you?
I agree. Example number 1. Leading panda scientists released a report last month documenting their extreme concern about the rapidly declining global panda population. Per the report, deforestation has led to the destruction of many panda habitats, as well as the depletion of their primary food source, bamboo. More importantly, panda births are declining rapidly, both in the wild and in captivity. So in short, say these leading scientists, when it comes to pandas, there is a severe dearth of births.
Emily, that doesn't even mention dregs. It's just another one of your dearth rhymes. Okay, I can do this next one. Example number 2 comes from the book The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, lightly edited for clarity. Quote, "Come, bourgeois," said Valentine to the butler, "take some of this lemonade. I see you are coveting a drink of it." "The fact is, mademoiselle," said Bourgeois, "I am dying of thirst, and since you are so kind as to offer it to me, I cannot say I should at all object to drinking your health in a glass of it." Bourgeois then threw back his head and emptied to the very dregs the glass which Valentine had filled. Unquote.
Sounds refreshing.
Well, that lemonade turned out to be poisoned, so...
Oh, well, let's do the second example then. Hopefully that'll be cheerier.
No, actually. So this comes from the Shakespeare play Richard III, and specifically from a scene where 2 murderers, who in the script are helpfully labeled first murderer and second murderer, and they're debating whether or not to assassinate someone as he sleeps, for reasons we really don't have time to get into right now. Emily, how would you like to be the first murderer?
I guess?
Cool. I'll be the second murderer then. And action.
What? Art thou afraid?
Not to kill him, having a warrant, but to be damned for killing him, from which no warrant can defend me.
I thought thou hadst been resolute.
So I am, to let him live.
I'll back to the Duke of Gloucester and tell him so.
Nay, prithee, stay a little. I hope this passionate humor of mine will change. It was wont to hold me but while 1 tells 20, which presumably means until 1 counts to 20.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20. How dost thou feel now?
Why, some certain dregs of conscience are yet within me.
But remember our reward when the deed's done, etc., etc. So do they eventually, with the knife and the assassination and everything?
Yeah, not everybody makes it out of this alive.
But what about the dregs of conscience?
Sorry, Emily, those were just dregs. Not enough of them, I guess.
Well, there seems to be a dearth of non-deathy examples today.
Well, that's just the way the example cookie crumbled today, I guess. Well, folks, I see we've got a dearth of time remaining.
Really, we're down to the very dregs of the show.
That's right, Emily. So we're going to sign off now. On behalf of all of us here at the Word of the Day podcast, thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Emily, for contributing these fine words and for appearing on the program.
My pleasure.
Until next time, everyone, this is Jamie Silva, your host, saying so long from the RAV4 studios. And to all you kids out there, remember, stay in school and just say no to dregs.